So, dear Ms. Director, dear Deputy of the State Secretary, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, thank you for the welcoming introduction and the invitation to this major event in the field of digital technologies and museums. I would like to start by telling you something about myself, actually, and my relationship with new technologies. I'm a member of the so-called Generation X, so people born between 1965 and 1980, which means I had this privilege to grow up with the first computers like ZX Spectrum or Commodore 64, seeing the rise of the mobile phones and trying to survive in this social media takeover and apparently being part of an AI revolution. So, quite a lot for a guy which actually rather takes a basketball in the hand as a mobile phone. And I see myself rather as an average, or in comparison to my 3 years younger brother of the Generation Y, an under-average use of digital technologies. So what can actually a digitally average guy tell this group of experts from different fields about new digital trends in Austrian museums? Rather little or nothing, but I still feel the need to say something since I am in my function as director of the Universalmuseum Joanneum, daily confronted with decisions concerning digitization and new technologies. So enough about me, but rather about the challenges for the museums in Austria and Middle Europe. I will be mostly speaking about the experiences and developments in the Universalmuseum Joanneum, which is actually an institution with some kind of a regional character but national size. The Joanneum was founded 212 years ago by the Archduke John with the clear goal to gather and use objects to educate the people of Styria. It is the oldest museum of Austria, and with approximately 5 million objects. Today, it's a public institution with 19 museums and a zoo, very important, on 14 locations in Styria, with approximately 600 employees. It's the second largest museum in Austria. Our museum faces actually many challenges in the changing society, as almost all other museums. The most relevant challenge for me is the question how to remain relevant for the upcoming generation. I love the quote of our Archduke John of Austria: "Remain loyal to the good old, but no less receptive for the good new." Which brings me to two major questions which I would like to share with you in today's presentation. How can we combine the importance of preservation with the need of renewal? And how to identify what is the good old and the good new in this process of renewal. In August 2022, we got a new ICOM definition of museum, which probably all know. I'm mentioning the definition since there is no question that digital technologies support all major pillars of museums' work: research, collecting, conserving, interpretation, and exhibition. Besides the definition, we could, in my opinion, add 3 more components to answer the questions: what are museums actually about? Component 1 is people. People, a museum in the best case is full of people, highly motivated staff and curious visitors which enjoy their time in knowledge exchange, getting new experiences or just spending free time in a nice environment. Component 2, in my opinion, are spaces, from old castles to modern art museums, from old cellars to mobile pavilions, from single countries to larger regions, a crucial element in a museum's experiences. And the third component is our perspectives, constantly changing view on objects or landscapes, from micro to macro, from romantic to politically relevant. all the three components are actually changing much faster and are often very unpredictable. You know, people are mostly black boxes, societies are in constant movement, and the dreams and values are always tested. The spaces, even if they survived centuries, are constantly not only changing their looks and purpose, but also meaning and relevance. And of course, perspectives, hundreds of different views on all stuff in a new context, impact of our way of life on the perspective on cultural heritage. In the recent 3 years, the changes were even enhanced by the pandemics, the climate change crisis, and war and migration, which also strongly concerns heritage institutions. The problem is that these quite, in my opinion, unstable components are crucial when we are talking about digitization and new technologies in museums, far more actually than the heritage itself, which is actually preserved by our institutions. I think this would be enough for the philosophical start, and let us continue on a more concrete strategic level. Let us start with the latest EU initiative of Collaborated Cloud for Cultural Heritage. Its goal is to help to safeguard European cultural treasures through a digital infrastructure. The cloud aims at fostering cooperation and co-creation among culture and creative sector and technology. A very noble initiative to support the museums in finding new ways of cooperation in this vast ocean of cutting-edge technologies for digitizing artifacts, researching artworks, or documenting data. It aims also to facilitate the access to advanced technologies and remove barriers for smaller and remote institutions. But still, I think we have something already going on, which you might all know, the Evergreen Europeana, running from 2008 to 2010, depending on how you count, including more than 3,000 institutions across Europe, bringing records of over 50 million cultural and scientific artifacts on a single platform, a huge achievement for this decade and a half. Such European initiatives have, of course, an impact on national strategies. Recently, a strategy on digital cultural heritage has been issued by the Austrian State Ministry with the graphics which nicely, I think, depicts this interaction between physical heritage and a digital realm, and each step from preservation to the display. The launch of the strategy is supported with a nationwide call for digitization of heritage objects, which will be added to Europeana. More about the strategy you will hear, I think, tomorrow from Elke Kellner from ICOM Austria. So actually, the big picture for, let's say, a very big picture for the museum should be quite clear. So digitize more objects and implement new technologies. I think many of you will agree that is sometimes easier to say than really actually do. In the Universalmuseum Joanneum, some years ago, we established our own digital transformation strategy. The vision of the strategy is that the Joanneum in the field communication and mediation increasingly makes visitor-centered digitization. However, the Joanneum is also responsible for the digital transformation within the organization. The digital transformation strategy contains 8 fields of action that are either increasingly outward towards the visitors or increasingly inwards towards the employees center. So, as a director, you always have to do the third pillar, so provide resources. At the end, it mostly comes to 3 major tasks in our museum, which digital technologies have a major impact on: collection management, accessibility to collection, and digital visitors experience. One of the basic tasks of any museum is to collect and preserve heritage. Physical objects which fill our depots need to be registered and stored properly. This task remains, despite all the technological development in databases, a huge, actually, resources challenge, since it's still personally intensive, handling task to create a digital archive of objects. In our museum, we are using IMDAS Pro as a database. Still no collection or department is fully satisfied with the entries in the database. They are not flawless since the people entering the data changed and the research developed. So a new never-ending story actually with quite an unknown result. As I mentioned before, the idea of digital accessible cultural heritage is very strong in Europe and supported by EU Commission through the different funding. But it might be quite challenging if the existing internal object registration digitization hasn't reached the level to automatically put all the collections online. Project Inter Steiermark was one of my first attempts conducted from 2011 to 2013. It had the goal to make archaeological finds at the archives kept in Austria, but coming from today's Slovenia, accessible via an online database. The project presented around 9,000 objects, 20,000 pages, and a comprehensive metadata. The project had also a follow-up project where we added bioarchaeological data, new research at the border area, and so on and so on. So all in all, around 2.5 million were invested in this new, freely accessible data. 10 years after, the data is still available since we are upkeeping the infrastructure. The only crux is that we have invested all this money for maybe 10 to 20 people Europe-wide, which accordingly to Google Analytics use the data. It is for them very relevant, but was the investment worth it? Therefore, I'm not so sure anymore that the right path is to present millions of objects online, especially when we're thinking about 3D. In any case, it's not sustainable and not climate neutral. So in our museums, we are now developing maybe a more curated approach to present objects online, trying to test new ways of storytelling and gamification. And the future will show if this approach or the approach with the millions of objects adds a higher value to our work. The third major theme in the museums is, of course, the digital experience of visitors in our museums and beyond. Also in these fields, there are different approaches from simple digital apps to virtual worlds. I will shortly present solutions from two projects. One of the results is a project Iron Age Danube with this simple e-learning tool, a simple platform joining animation with gamification in order to just educate about the work of archaeologists. A simple tool, but quite effective when used in schools and smaller events. In the following project called Danube's Archaeological E-Landscape, we grew bolder with new technologies and started to experiment with new mixed realities up to virtual worlds. To simplify how to get from archaeological research to virtual presentation in a landscape, in a museum, and then motivate visitors to visit the landscape from which the objects derived. One of the outputs of the project was a joint exhibition called Stories of the Past, which was shown in 9 countries, also in this museum. And the exhibition, we joined these virtual landscapes from different time periods created in participating countries with different approaches. New technologies, especially virtual reality, were tested in workshops. They functioned as part of a permanent exhibition or were presented in separated rooms. The virtual world we created by using different methods depending on the type of archaeological heritage. For example, results of geophysical research were used for positioning buildings. A storytelling was made by using historical persons. We scanned museum exhibit to feel the virtual worlds. But still, with the combination of drawing characters, the line between the reconstruction based on archaeological research and the imagination of the story was clearly shown. Personally, I think the project offers very interesting new approaches and experiences for visitors. The experience of a museum, of course, can't cope with the gaming and entertainment industry, but I'm sure we all agree on that. But the possibility that we upgrade the visitor's experience in the museums is in any case available. Still, it has to be integrated in the museum because, in my opinion, such context won't be really downloaded outside the museum. 4,600 people from 9 countries also responded to a questionnaire for our visitor surveys. They stated that exhibition made archaeological historical heritage more attractive, that they were inspired to visit also other countries. Most had a positive feedback. Nonetheless, a few important points, maybe negative points. So many of the visitors would prefer presentations with digital tools and the original heritage. Visitors also reported that VR glasses were too heavy and slipped down, and some sides of the VR often created nausea. The problem is likely due to scene changes and jumping and walking. At the end of the day, museum always tries to answer the question, what do our visitors actually enjoy and expect in a museum? A hands-on interpretive experience, or maybe an enjoyment of new technologies in a reconstructed museum. Also, in this case, I don't have the answer, and the time will tell where to go in each museum. In the context of new technologies, I would also like to speak about immersive experiences for visitors by presenting an example from Styria. An exhibition format called Showing Styria was initiated 2 years ago, and under the title Diversity of Life, we have 2023 examined the fascination and the significance of biodiversity. The location for this exhibition format in Austria was the Herberstein Animal World. In East Styria, there we opened our House of Biodiversity. One part of Showing Styria is a mobile pavilion. It has a surface area of around 700 square meters and a 30-meter long curved screen. It invites visitors to undertake an immersive journey through the realms of the atmospheres, climate, and space exploration. For this, 10 artworks have been produced by internationally renowned artists and 11 research statements created. In the context of immersive experiences, I have to mention also traveling exhibitions like Van Gogh or Frida Kahlo immersive experiences, which flooded the Austrian markets. They offer a combination of copies of known works with a combination of huge immersive rooms and virtual reality. Personally, I really enjoyed these experiences, but also got more convinced how important it is for museums to put original objects which they preserve in the focus of the work. And let me just shortly also mention AI in museums in Austria, since this is also one of the themes of the conference. Recently, an article was published in Standard asking the question, will artificial intelligence completely transform museums' operations? And if I may quote the curators, AI has now reached the point where it can produce exhibitions. The programs are not yet sophisticated enough to meet the quality standards, but in a foreseeable future it will be possible to use digital tools to put together a finished exhibition. What does it mean for museums? Does artificial intelligence actually have the potential to turn exhibitions operation as we know them upside down? Many museums are considering new technologies, but I haven't yet seen a major breakout movement in this field. Probably, and I hope this conference can also provide further impulses on this topic. Thank you very much.